Hello everybody, in this video what we're going to do is we're going to continue our discussion on the syllabus and focusing on the grading and assessment section of the syllabus. So here you can just see a basic kind of breakdown of the distribution or the cutoffs of the grades. It is very standard for the Department of Psychology. It's 95% above as an A+, 90 to 94.99 as an A minus is 85 to 89.99, and so forth. So you see the letter grade, the percentile range that you had to fall under to get that letter grade, and then the grade points you would earn from that. And then on the bottom you have just basic descriptors for what those letter grades mean. So an A minus to an A plus means an excellent understanding of the material, enough that you could actually TA if we hired undergraduate TAs, which we don't, because you know the material that well enough that you can actually grade the assignments, and we would have some faith in you. However, if you do good but not excellent, that's a B. So nothing to look down on a B. It's good work. C is understood as satisfactory, D plus is poor, and a D is a minimal pass, and then anything below 50% is a fail. However, I should let you know that this is not a curved course, and that the grade cutoffs are more guidelines, and that I reserve the right to revise any of the grade cutoffs for the conversion of percentage grades to the equivalent letter grade. Now this barely ever happens. I've never had to do it myself, but there's a slight possibility that it may come up, so it's something I have to put in here. Now a second note, and this one is something that I've had to do in the past, is that there will be a notation of a 1 being added to your final letter grade for your transcript if you do not complete sufficient work, and that 1 just means that you've missed significant coursework. So what's going to make you get a 1 next to your letter grade? Well, if you fail to complete any of the exams through an unexcused absence, you fail to complete at least one assignment, you fail to complete at least one of the participation or reflection papers, or you fail to do the course paper. And I'll discuss all these different components here in just a second. Now what you see below this is the different components and the weightings of these different components. So you have a midterm and a final, both are worth 30%. You have participation and reflection papers that are worth 10%, and the assignment and discussions with those assignments for 25% in a 5% course paper. Now let's talk about the exams in a little bit more in depth. This is going to be 60% of your total final grade, with 30% going towards the midterm and 30% for the final. Now with the exams, they're both going to be conducted during the scheduled class time, and they're going to be only 2 hours, so you'll have from 5 to 7 to complete them, and they will be done online through eClass, and I'll go more into that later on. So, and remember with this is an evening course, so that means that the final exam is going to be scheduled on the last day of class and not during the exam period. Now exams are going to consist of questions that will be some combination of multiple choice, matching, fill in the blank, short answer, and long answer. Now this idea of a combination of these means that, the midterm may not necessarily have every single component, but it may have, let's say, multiple choice, short answer, and fill in the blank. Now I'll also say that the exams are going to be open notes. However, that doesn't mean you should be going through your notes all the time with every question. You should still study, prepare, and use those notes as a last resort. Because what has happened in the past, and it's actually pretty common, is that when students hear open notes exam, they don't study as hard. So when they actually take the exam, they're not fully prepared, and they spend so much time trying to find the answers in their notes or in the lecture slides that they don't do well, and they actually don't even finish nearly half of the exam. So when you're taking the exams, making sure you engage in proper time management, and also not over relying on your notes, where it's actually going to be a detriment to you. Now, what type of questions are going to be on the exam? Well, they're going to focus more on things such as identification, conceptual, definitional, and application type questions. So when you're studying, you should try to accomplish these 3 different things. First, understand the technical language. So for example, do you know what dehumanization is? Second, be able to word that in ordinary language. So can you explain what dehumanization is to somebody off the street that may not be familiar with psychology? And C, be able to recognize it in the real world. If you were watching a news clip, can you see instances of dehumanization? So there's some additional information. Make sure you read through it for the exams. The last couple things I want to talk about the exams though is what happens if you miss the midterm exam, and the final exam deferments. So if you missed the midterm exam, you had to contact me within 24 hours of the scheduled exam. And if it's for inexcusable reasons, let's say it's some serious medical condition or some serious circumstances outside of your control, what will then happen is you'll be allowed to take a makeup exam. And then what that means is basically you're going to be taking an exam that is in similar difficulty. However, it's going to be a written-based exam, so you'll have to answer a series of short and long answer questions. And this policy is just basically set up to protect the academic integrity of that initial exam. So if students have taken, the midterm already, and then there's 2 or 3 people that didn't take the midterm, but they have it scheduled within the week, well, what they might do is they may contact the other students, and it's not going to be fair for anybody that actually took the exam without that foresight. So please do not reschedule the midterm exam if you don't absolutely have to. However, if you do have to, I'm going to allow you to do the makeup. It is just going to be a bit more writing on your end. Also, quick note, please make sure that you're not engaging in any kind of dishonesty when you send me an email saying you cannot take the midterm as scheduled, because that will just end up with me submitting that to the powers that be, the deans, and they may take some severe disciplinary action, so be careful. Now for the final exam, I actually, as the instructor, have no authority whatsoever to say that you can take the deferred final exam. That goes through you and your faculty. So you'll have to submit an application. Let's say if you're in the Faculty of Arts, you'll submit it to the Faculty of Arts, or if you're in Science, to the Faculty of Science, etc., etc. And they'll make some sort of decision. I will say only do this again if you absolutely have to, because if not, you may get denied, and that will just be problematic, because now you just have a 0 for a final exam, and that would be very problematic for your final grade, and you'll get the notation of missing significant coursework. And then the deferment date for the final exam is going to be Thursday, January 7th, from 2 to 4 p.m. So a little bit after the break, so just pretty much right after the break. And that might be very difficult for students because you haven't been keeping up with the material as much as everyone else did when they took it in the original scheduled date. Now let's shift away from the exams a little bit and start to talk about the participation reflection papers. And these are going to count for 10% of your final grade, and I'm going to count the best 8 out of 10. So that means you can either miss 2, do poorly on 2, or some sort of combination of those, and it won't affect your grade at all. They'll just be tossed out. However, if you fail to complete 3 of these, well, you're going to get a 0 on 1 of them. Now for the participation component of this, it's basically going to be 2 things. In the beginning of the term, the first week, you're going to be doing a pre-test. Basically, I'm going to ask you some questions that would be very similar to what you'd see on the midterm and the final, and you would just answer them. Now, I don't expect you to do well on these at all. If you do, hey, that's awesome, but if not, no big deal. Basically, it's, did you complete it? You get full points. If you didn't complete it, you don't get any points. And basically, this is going to help me kind of keep track of how well you may know some of these before the class, as well as how well you learn them throughout the course. So again, these will be scored, but your score is not going to matter. It's going to be, did you do it versus did you not do it? And then the second participation is going to be at the very end of the term, and it's going to be focused much more on the course overall in general. So again, these 2 are just, you either do it or you don't. However, the other 8 of these are going to be more based on your reflections of the course content, and it might just be having you think about it, engage in it a little bit deeper, tie it to your personal experiences or your own personal worldview, or it might even be trying to offer some sort of reflection on the content and related to maybe other courses that you've taken. Now, these are not going to be based on that participation of either you did it or you didn't. These will actually be scored from a 0 to a 1 point. So 1 point is going to be full points for each reflection paper. And one thing that kind of implies is these aren't meant for you to spend a lot of time on. I'm not going to accept any papers that are over 1 page, and honestly, this is something that you can probably do within the half of a page. But the purpose of this is not to just regurgitate what you've already heard through the lecture videos or in the readings, but basically just to offer your own thoughts on it. So if you turn an assignment, you may not get full points, but what are ways that can get you closer to ensure full points for the reflection papers? Well, first, you can show that you actually engage with the course material, so Did you do any of the readings, watch the videos, think about it at some level of depth? Then you're going to, pretty much display going beyond the course content. So not simply repeating what was said, but kind of offering your own spin on it or your own understanding. And then lastly, provide some sort of fully thought out reflections. So this is just meaning that you're not going to provide a bunch of words that have all these kind of inconsistencies or contradictions within either each other or the theory itself, and basically just coming up with something that's well thought out. Now, some of these reflection papers are going to have another required component, and that is being active and present in a group discussion. Now, for these group discussions, you'll be given a prompt at the beginning of the section, and basically you'll talk about it with your group members, and then at the end you'll write a quick reflection based on what you talked about in your own thoughts. However, for those reflection papers that don't have a group discussion component, the prompt will be provided to you about a week before, and you'll just kind of think about it while you're watching the video lectures, doing the readings, or engaging in the other forms of course content delivery that might happen, such as an audio clip or YouTube video. And then you would just write about your thoughts and submit it online. Now, of course, you would also write about it and submit it online for the group discussion. And both you will require to submit your own reflection paper. So even if you talk about it with a group, it needs to be your own work, your own ideas, your own thoughts. Now, because I'm going to allow you to drop 2 of these, there's going to be no allowance for any late submissions, and they're going to be due on Friday by 11:55 p.m. of that week. So pretty much the day after the class meets, you would just have to have a quick submission due. And you could kind of take from that the implication that this isn't meant for you to spend a whole lot of time on. I'm not even looking for you to spend an hour on these papers. Just give it a little bit of thought and just kind of write it out in a coherent, understandable way. Now, the group discussions are not only going to be for these reflection papers or some of the reflection papers, we're also going to do it for the assignments as well. But the assignments are going to be a little bit more involved, and they're going to be a little bit longer in your responses. And also, these assignments are going to be a little bit different from what you might be used to in your other classes. And that's because I kind of split them up into 3 different phases. Now, the first phase, or what I call the before discussion phase, is going to be the assignments that you're generally used to. I'm going to give you some questions, you write out the answers to those questions, and then you submit it to eClass. However, that's only the first phase. In the second phase, we're going to come together as a class. I'm going to split you in groups, and you're going to discuss what you wrote down on your assignment to the other students in your group. So basically, this is kind of just a group discussion, and I'm going to give like 2 points based on participation and professionalism. So basically, did you attend? And then also, did you engage in the material in a very respectful manner? So I'm expecting to give everybody, for all the different assignments, 2 points for that component. And then after the discussion, you're going to have to reflect on what your group talked about and then submit just a quick worksheet. And basically, this is going to ask you, did you engage in meaningful discussion? Did people bring up things that you haven't thought about before, and what? And did anything in this discussion kind of change how you thought about things, or did you gain insight into how other people may have interpreted, the assignment or the responses? So the first part is going to be 13 points. That's the written assignment, and that's based all on substance. The group discussion is going to be 2 points based on participation and professionalism. And then the remaining 5 points is going to be for your, after discussion worksheet, and that's going to be based on substance as well. But it's not going to be necessarily are things right or wrong. It's just how well thought out is it. So basically, this is kind of another form of a reflection paper, but it's going to be a little bit more pointed and specific to the assignment. And for these, there's going to be 4 of them, so you'll have to complete all 4. But these are actually going to be, I think, pretty interesting. So one of them, you're going to watch a movie and pretty much answer some questions about what you saw and tie it to course content. Another one, you're going to be watching a media depiction, something from the news, and doing something similar. And then the other 2 are going to be a little bit more interactive and creative in a different sense. Now, for these group discussions, and I guess just the group discussions overall, the purpose of them is for you to share your own thoughts and responses that you've already submitted, to engage in the discussion with the people who may have different interpretations, and to critically engage with the material in a respectful manner. So please always be respectful. Some people may say things that you really dislike or disagree with. However, I would suggest maybe approaching it as maybe you're a researcher and they're a participant, and you're not necessarily judging them, you're just trying to understand their perspective. However, that said, I would say just make sure that you are being respectful, you're not engaging in any, sexist or racist behavior or statements, and try not to provoke any kind of, contentious topics that are not necessarily related to the material. And if there is an issue, please let me know and I will make sure to address it. Now, because these assignments have 3 different phases, there's technically 3 different due dates, if you will. So the first is going to be on the scheduled day of the class. You would have to have your, assignment submitted. Then it's actually being during the, group discussion. So that's kind of a deadline, but just more of a time frame you have to be present. And then the worksheet, I'm actually going to give you up to the Monday, 11:55 p.m. to submit that via eClass. The worksheets will be online in the assignments section, so just make sure you go there. But another note is that if you do not participate in the discussion, so that group discussion, not only are you going to miss out on those 2 points, but you're also not able to do the 5-point worksheet afterwards. So basically you're going to be only limited to at most 13 points for your assignment out of the 20 points. However, let's say that you do complete the assignment, you submit it, but you're not able to go to the group discussion for some serious circumstance outside of your personal control. Well, if that's the case, just email me within 24 hours of that day. And what's going to happen is I'm going to give you an alternative assignment that's going to require a little bit more work because you're not engaging in a group discussion, but it will allow you to make up for those 7 points that you missed out on. But please only do this if there is some sort of serious condition that or circumstances that stops you from engaging in that group discussion, and not as an out for having those group discussions. Now for these assignments, I do allow late submissions. However, for each day that they're late, that is going to lead to a 10% penalty. So what that means is that, let's say you submit an assignment for, one of the group discussions, and you don't have it submitted by the time the class would actually start. Well, what that means is that if you submit it, let's say that next night or the next morning, well, you're going to get the amount of points you earned minus 10% of those points. Similarly, if you submit, let's say the, reflection worksheet on 11:56 p.m. on a Monday, but it was actually due at 11:55, even with that just minute, there will be a 10% late fee. So make sure that you are keeping track of time, what you've submitted, what you haven't, and make sure that you do submit the appropriate documents. So that means making sure you're not submitting something from maybe a different class, or even, let's say, the written assignment portion before the group discussion and using that as your worksheet. So, and the worksheets are going to be kind of a set format just provided on, eClass anyways. Now, the final component is going to be a course paper, and that's going to be worth 5% of your final grade. So in addition to the final exam, you're going to be doing this course paper that has you kind of connect all these different things we talked about within the course. Now, this is not a course paper that you might be used to, and that it's not going to be a 10, 15, 20 page, paper. It's going to be just kind of basically just a long answer question, and it's actually going to have a maximum of 2 pages single spaced. And what this is going to do is this is going to have you take all this different material and form kind of a coherent synthesis of all that material. And what this is going to allow me to do is to basically ask you a question that would be cumulative. So the final exam's not cumulative. I'm only going to be asking, questions based on the material covered since the midterm. Although I will say some of the concepts that we do talk about in that first half is it's very important that you do have an understanding of, because it will kind of keep coming up and up and up. So for example, anthropologies, I'll be talking about quite at length throughout the entire term. So yes, it does allow me to kind of create a cumulative component for you to be graded on, but not overburden you with information to study for that final exam. And this also means that you don't necessarily have to write, responses to the questions for this course paper in the context of an exam where you have much more limited time and you're trying to address all these other questions that, may distract you. So yeah, that's basically the reason why I have this course paper, just to allow for a cumulative exam without it being a cumulative exam, and to have you try to come up with a coherent thesis for the entire course. Now for the course paper, I'm not going to allow any late submissions. You have to have it submitted before that start of the final exam. and before the final exam is scheduled to start, not when you're going to start. So if you're like, well, I'll just wait 15 minutes, that doesn't give you 15 more minutes. So make sure it's submitted before 5 p.m. Now, in terms of representative evaluative material, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use that practice test that I talked about earlier for that first participation mark to give you a sample of the types of questions that I'm going to ask in the exams. Actually, these are from a previous exam that I've had for this class. So you'll be able to see like, okay, what are the types of questions I'm going to ask? What are the ways that you can possibly answer it? And then also I'm going to add additional questions on top of those just to get some basic ideas or understandings that you have of the human concept and some of the things that we're going to be talking about. So I'll make sure to kind of clearly delineate where, the representative material is, and then also just kind of these basic open-ended survey response types questions. So that's going to be it for the grading component section of the syllabus. In the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish everything up. I'll quickly go over some of the additional information, student responsibilities, and then end with the course schedule.